In the heart of 18th century Europe, a young girl was born, not yet a queen, not yet the great, but destined to shape the course of an empire. Catherine the Great began her story as Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, born on May 2, 1729, inside the grand castle of the Dukes of Pomerania in the Kingdom of Prussia, today's Poland. Her father, Prince Christian August, was a respected Prussian general, while her mother, Joanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gottorp, had deep royal connections links that stretched all the way to the Swedish throne. Two of Sophie's cousins would later become kings of Sweden, Gustav III and Charles III. Although born into nobility, Sophie's family wasn't wealthy. She grew up under strict discipline, tutored by a French governess who shaped her into a refined, multilingual young woman fluent in German and French, the language of European elites. But behind her polished manners was a fearless soul. Sophie taught herself to wield a sword and was often called a tomboy princess. In her memoirs, Catherine later admitted, "I see nothing of interest in my childhood." To her, those early years were ordinary, but history tells a different story. For small German noble families, marriage was the ultimate power move, and Sophie's mother was determined to see her daughter rise. At just 10 years old, Sophie met her second cousin Peter of Holstein-Gottorp, the awkward boy who would one day become Peter III of Russia. From the moment they met, she was unimpressed. She wrote that she found him detestable, pale, immature, and far too fond of drink. Even as children, she kept her distance, staying at one end of the castle while Peter lingered at the other. What Sophie couldn't have known was that this uncomfortable encounter would be the first step toward a throne, and a legacy that would echo across centuries. She would one day become Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, conqueror of hearts and empires, and one of the most formidable women in world history. This was not just the beginning of a queen, it was the dawn of a legend. When Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst set foot on Russian soil, she was just a teenager, far from home, far from power, and far from the life she once knew. But beneath her polite smile and graceful manners burned a fierce ambition, a spark that would soon ignite an empire. It was 1744 when Sophie arrived in Russia, summoned by Empress Elizabeth, aunt of the awkward and unpredictable Peter of Holstein-Gottorp, the same Peter Sophie once found detestable as a child. Empress Elizabeth saw potential in Sophie. She was smart, disciplined, and spoke with charm that impressed everyone at court. But there was one condition. To marry Peter, Sophie had to abandon her old life. She converted from Lutheranism to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, taking a new name, Yekaterina Alekseyevna, or, as history remembers her, Catherine. Catherine's marriage to Peter was nothing short of a disaster. He was immature, erratic, and more interested in toy soldiers than ruling a nation. Catherine, however, was everything he was not. She was intelligent, calculated, and determined to learn. While Peter played, she studied reading philosophy, history, and the writings of Voltaire and Montesquieu. She prepared herself, not for love, but for leadership. Catherine's private journals revealed her vision. She dreamed of a modern Russia, a country guided by reason, education, and strength. But her ambitions came with risk in a court filled with spies, whispers, and rival factions. One wrong move could end her life. Still, she moved carefully, winning allies in silence, earning respect in secret. By 1762, the empire stood on edge. Empress Elizabeth was dead. Peter had finally become Tsar of Russia, and within months, chaos began. His decisions angered the army, the church, and the nobility. And in the shadows, Catherine waited. The woman once groomed to be a wife now prepared to become a ruler. In July of 1762, Catherine made her move. With the support of the Imperial Guard, she seized control of the throne in a coup d'etat. Peter was arrested, and days later, he was dead. Russia had a new empress, not born Russian, not born royal, but made for power. From an unwanted marriage in a foreign land, Catherine rose to command one of the world's greatest empires. Her reign would usher in a golden age, driven by enlightenment, expansion, and ambition. But every crown comes with a cost. And the true test of her greatness was only beginning. This was not luck. This was destiny. The year was 1762. Russia had a new ruler, Catherine II, Empress of all the Russias. She had taken the throne through courage and calculation, but now she faced a greater challenge: to rule and to transform. Catherine knew that power meant more than a crown. She envisioned a new Russia, educated, cultured, enlightened. She invited Europe's brightest minds to her court, corresponding with thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot. To Catherine, knowledge was as powerful as any army. Under her reign, education flourished. She founded schools for both boys and girls, a bold move in her time. Libraries grew and art thrived in every corner of the empire. She established the Smolny Institute for Noble Maidens, the first state-funded school for women in Europe. Catherine turned Russia into a center of art and elegance. She built theaters, collected masterpieces, and filled her palaces with treasures from across Europe. The Hermitage Museum, which began as her private collection, would one day become one of the greatest art galleries in the world. But while Catherine championed art and learning, she never forgot the sword that won her throne. She expanded Russia's borders through wars with the Ottoman Empire and the partitions of Poland, securing more land than any ruler before her. By the late 18th century, Russia was no longer a rising empire. It was a dominant power in the world. Catherine carefully shaped her public image, the philosopher queen, the mother of her people, the defender of progress. She ruled for 34 years, longer than any other woman in Russian history. Her reign became known as Russia's Golden Age, a time of power, art, and vision that changed the world's perception of the Russian Empire. From a forgotten princess to the most powerful woman of her time, Catherine's story proves that greatness is never given. It's earned, with vision, courage, and the will to change history. Power is a double-edged sword. For Catherine the Great, it brought glory, but also danger. Behind the gold and grandeur of her empire lay a world of plots, betrayals, and shadows. A world where even the throne could not guarantee safety. After the coup that placed her on the throne, Catherine's power was never secure. Her husband, Peter III, was dead under suspicious circumstances, and though she denied involvement, whispers haunted her reign. Some said it was justice, others called it murder. But Catherine knew one thing: she could never afford to appear weak. Though Catherine ruled an empire, her heart was not made of stone. Throughout her life, she had many lovers, men who offered her loyalty, comfort, and companionship. Among them was Grigory Orlov, the man who helped her seize power, and later, Grigory Potemkin, her most trusted ally and perhaps the only man she truly loved. But love in the royal court came at a price. Every affair sparked rumors. Every favorite became a threat. In 1773, Catherine faced her greatest internal challenge, the Pugachev Rebellion. A Cossack named Emelian Pugachev claimed to be Peter III, declaring himself the rightful ruler of Russia. His uprising spread like wildfire. Peasants, soldiers, and the oppressed joined his cause, calling for vengeance against the nobility. The rebellion tested Catherine's strength and resolve. When it was over, tens of thousands were dead, and the Empress had learned a painful lesson: mercy could destroy a throne. After the rebellion, Catherine's rule hardened. She tightened her control, expanded her bureaucracy, and gave nobles more power over their lands and their serfs. While Europe praised her as the enlightened empress, millions of peasants lived in misery. The same Enlightenment ideals that inspired her reforms also exposed her empire's deep contradictions. In a palace filled with power, loyalty was rare. Plots to overthrow her emerged again and again from discontented nobles, spies, and even her own son, Paul. Catherine distrusted Paul deeply, fearing he might one day undo everything she built. She secretly planned to bypass him in the line of succession, but fate had other plans. Catherine ruled longer than any woman in Russian history. She was brilliant, ruthless, and endlessly complex, a queen of contradictions. She built a golden empire, but every empire casts a shadow. Power is never pure. It is earned, guarded, and feared. The year was 1790. Catherine the Great, once the unstoppable force of empire, now stood at the edge of time. Her power was vast, her fame unmatched. But even empires, like people, must one day face their twilight. Catherine was in her 60s, still sharp, still commanding. But the years had taken their toll. The friends and lovers who once surrounded her were gone. Grigory Potemkin, her greatest love and political partner, had died years earlier, leaving a void no one could fill. Yet Catherine worked tirelessly, drafting new reforms, corresponding with philosophers, and dreaming of expanding Russia even further into the east and beyond. By the end of her reign, Russia stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, from Europe to the edges of Asia. Catherine had transformed her adopted homeland into a European superpower. She built cities, opened schools, and fostered a culture that rivaled Paris and Vienna. But behind the grandeur, cracks were forming. Corruption spread through her court, and discontent brewed among the serfs, the people whose labor built her empire but never shared in its glory. Catherine's greatest fear was not foreign enemies, it was her own blood. Her son Paul despised her. He blamed his mother for his father's death, for his neglect, and for keeping him from power. Catherine saw in Paul instability, a man unfit to rule. She quietly planned to name her grandson Alexander as heir instead. But history would not give her the chance. On November 17, 1796, Catherine the Great suffered a massive stroke. She never regained consciousness. After 34 years on the throne, the longest reign of any woman in Russian history, the Empress was gone. She was 67 years old. When Catherine died, Russia mourned, but the world remembered. She had been born a minor German princess, yet rose to become one of the most powerful women in history. Her name became legend. Catherine the Great, the empress who defied expectations, ruled with intellect, and ushered in a golden age that would shape her nation for centuries. Even today, her story stands as a reminder that greatness is not inherited. It is forged through will, vision, and the courage to rule one's own destiny. Catherine's empire may have ended with her life, but her influence never died. Her story remains, a testament to ambition, brilliance, and the eternal cost of power. Legacy Lens, where the past lives forever. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more fascinating stories.